Hi, Jeremy here. This video is for my colleagues, my fellow practitioners, health professionals, anybody out there working to help people get their lives back, especially from complex chronic illness. I want to share some of the stuff I've been working on that's helped me a lot in my mission to help people heal. And it has a lot to do with the way we set up our systems. So a long time ago, many years ago, I knew there was a way that I could work online, right? I thought, okay, I'm going to try to leverage the internet. I'm talking like 2010, 2012. I was trying to work out a model to do this. And the trouble was, with an Eastern medicine background, I was relying really heavily on acupuncture. And it's not just that profession of acupuncturists, but also like chiropractors have the same thing where there's a lot of manual adjustment, and different people need to learn, depending on your skill set, depending on your expertise level, learn how to take what you have and be able to transfer as much as possible into an online space. Because yeah, you can't reach through the internet and put a needle in somebody's body and help them with acupuncture, right? And you can't reach through the internet and adjust their spine. But there's a lot of things we can do when we understand that our medicine goes beyond any one particular technique. This was one of the little lessons I learned along the way here. And it has to do with, I was underestimating herbs. Really, I mean, that's what it comes down to. I was more, in my mind, I'd created a lens that acupuncture was the more powerful thing. And my herbal training, although it was very good, it didn't have the same oomph behind it. Once I realized how powerful herbs could be, then I knew I could start expanding my range and not just help people in my local town or community, but help anybody with a condition that I have an expertise in. Which this changed everything, because now I'm not specialized in my town. I'm not geographically limited. When I set up a specialty and I say, okay, I'm working with complex chronic health conditions, there's people all over the world raising their hands that want help with this. And I've made myself known. I could never have done that if I was still kind of stuck behind my needles as the main thing. So you may hear some crows today. You may hear some waves. I'm at the beach, and the crows are talking this morning. So getting out from my one kind of limiting belief of, well, my medicine is tactical and manual, therefore I can't go online, that helped me a lot. I freed up a lot of my own kind of mental bandwidth, and I started to get creative. And the other thing I realized was that once I started doing herbs online, was that I wanted to have very customized protocols, because that's how I understood herbal medicine, is very customized. And I wound up doing basically just one-on-one, the same thing I was doing in my office. So what happened for me was I was able to expand my reach and help more people. But what also happened was I didn't change any of my business systems or my structure. Basically, I was just copying my kind of time for money model from a brick and mortar and then applying that online and doing, consults and Zoom calls and Skypes and things like that. This was all well before 2019, by the way. So it was kind of interesting to be pioneering some of that. People weren't used to doing anything with their health over telemedicine just yet. There was a lot of resistance actually that I found from people not understanding that model, even my own colleagues. But I'm happy to say I'm here now years later, and I think that everybody's getting a little more sophisticated in terms of how they understand using the internet to help other people. So we'll talk more about what I'm doing with mentorship and teaching some of these systems. But the basic thing I want to get through to you is that you have to unlock your mind in terms of what you're assuming needs to happen. And you need to do that because the conventional models we have will lead to burnout. The time for money thing will lead to burnout. And when I said the patient base could expand, right? I went online and the patient base could expand and I could help more people that way. But what didn't change was my internal systems. That means I have to rearrange everything I was doing to try to avoid burnout, because the same trap of burnout from brick and mortar can also happen online when you look and you've just got full Zoom calls. So I had to upgrade my systems on my end and get a different business model so that I could scale without losing my mind, basically, because I know about burnout. The last time I had burnout, I was actually a student. I got burnout before I even entered the field. It wasn't pretty. I can just tell you it ended with me in handcuffs getting walked through the desert. So not a fun thing. You want to avoid burnout at all costs. And I'm laughing about, my history, but burnout's serious. I mean, people, you can wind up with all kinds of things happen in your life. Drug addictions, doing cry for help type behavior, starting to lose your relationships where you start to see the people around you, especially your family, you start to see them as like leaks on your energy. And it's bad news, man. It hurts your relationships and it hurts your future. And if you burn out, there's another thing I learned. If you burn out, you help no one, right? So sacrificing the future to make the present better in practice is actually, it's a bad move, because you're borrowing from the long-term mojo. So if you bend over, basically what I'm saying is if you bend over backwards to accommodate every single person you can in a linear time for money kind of model, you will run out of hours in the day, you'll run out of mojo. And if you keep doing that, you're basically borrowing your future mojo to make up for the daily mojo deficit that you have. And what happens is then you burn out. and then you need a break, and then maybe you never come back to this field, you do something entirely different. And what that means is, the way I'm translating this in my mind is that if we do everything we can to accommodate our current patients, I mean, that's good, you want to help people, but you also need to dial up your system so that you can do that without breaking yourself, right? Because you don't want to trade your current patient's happiness, even if it's important, for every other person you could possibly help throughout the course of your career. I know this is a weird way to look at it, but you don't want to leverage your future against your present. And one of the best ways I found to do that without burning out is to have systems upgraded and really use the internet. And what that means is you're using groups, right? You're not doing one-on-one type calls, which is great, by the way, because now your time is freed up. This was one of the things too with creating a remote program. I thought, okay, this is great because a lot of complex chronic patients, they have a hard time keeping their appointments, right? And it's not necessarily their fault. It's just if you have fibromyalgia and you had an appointment, I know this from as an acupuncturist, they would have appointments scheduled and you get this last minute call, I can't make it today, I'm having a flare. I'm really sorry, I really wanted to be here, right? And what I realized was that, yeah, what we do in our offices is great, but at the same time, there's logistics wrapped around that, where some of these people legitimately can't get to your office in the first place. And sometimes even if they can, they don't necessarily want to, because now they're fighting traffic and doing all this stuff just to get to see you. And we as clinicians, we don't keep that stuff in mind. We tend to see our own perspective. But when you start thinking empathetically, and like, how do the patients feel, right? And of course, it helps if you have been a patient in the past. You can draw on your own experience too and be honest with yourself and go, hey, there's asymmetry in the system, right? I want to have it to where the patients their needs are being met too, even the needs that they don't want to talk about with you. Like, geez, I really don't like going to these appointments, but you help. They don't always say that to you. You have to learn how to suss this stuff out, this information, because that's how you get to know people, really what's going on with them. So that was one of the things I realized was, hey, if we can get rid of appointments, if we can work virtually, this would save a lot of trouble. But then the next piece is actually having scheduled appointments, right? Because now we go virtual, but now why do we have to talk on Tuesday at 11 a.m. and then have another scheduled appointment where we follow up on 6 weeks later, right? And in that time, how's the person supposed to get answers, right? So instead of having these scheduled things on Zoom or in office, you can create a business model where you have this wide open kind of all access, right? Carte blanche access to you within a chat group. Easy. Messages, right? People are used to this. We're used to this. I love communicating that way. It's very quick, it's very tidy, and you don't have to have these scheduled things. And what's great is that none of the people I work with have to wait to hear back from me because I'm on it within a day or two. I usually have a pretty comprehensive and personalized answer for them. It's a fantastic model. It really is. It takes a lot of the pressure off. And the patients, who wants to wait 6 weeks? If you have a question right after your last appointment, right? And now you got to wait like 6 weeks. So this is where you start to reinvent these things. And I didn't come up with all this stuff out of the ether, right? The way I've looked at herbs, the way I've learned how to use herbs, I've been able to get away from having to rack my brain for every single thing because I've found mentors, I found outstanding teachers that have taught me frameworks and systems that I've built on so that I now have an order of operations and a lot of what I call clinical clarity. And this works too for supplements, naturopaths, functional medicine folks. If your thinking is kind of, for lack of a better term, if you're kind of guessing or hoping and trying to rely on luck, in terms of what you recommend for supplements and things like that, or if you're just strictly treating numbers, there's a better way to do it where you're organizing the treatment through time so that the patient has steps as opposed to just kind of grabbing for one thing or another. And there's a lot of reasons why this is important to have, but we call it clinical clarity and we've got systems around this. This is one of the things that I've been opening up and now teaching some of my colleagues, other practitioners, that basically need to learn this stuff because there's only one of me, right? I'm helping people. I'm doing a great job. I enjoy it, right? Working internationally with a broad patient base, but there's a lot of suffering folks out there. There's in the U.S. alone. I mean, I'm international, but if you just count the U.S. alone, there's like 30 to 50 million people that have complex chronic inflammatory conditions. And it's getting worse, by the way. This is only getting worse. They need help. They need your help. I can't be everywhere. I can't scale up to 30 to 50 million people, right? That's a lot. So I've been training some colleagues. We're starting to build a bit of a force out there. Some of these ideas are starting to get around. But this isn't stuff I invented or just made up out of thin air. This is all tested, tested methodologies, tested ways of clinical thinking where we're looking at, like one of my mentors is a doctor in China. He can see 150 to 200 patients a day, 150 to 200, right? I said that, you heard it, per day. And he's doing an awesome job with them. They're getting better. They love it. They line up. they walk and drive past many other doctors to go see him. And I learned a lot from just spending a short amount of time with him of how to create systems around your clinical thinking so that you can become more efficient and get better at your medicine, whatever that medicine might be. We look at universal first principles. So everything that applies to Eastern medicine, we take it to also, as I mentioned, supplements and things like that too. It's the same type of clean thinking. So I was able to take mentorship, right? Pay very close attention, put it into practice, expand on it, develop it. I'm still developing it, right? Clinical clarity, it's a never-ending, expanding fractal of understanding, which you get the hang of that once you've got your kind of mental clinical algorithms and your flow charts built and things like that. So it helps if you specialize, then there's a lot less to keep track of. But this is the kind of thing that we work on in the group we have for health professionals. It's called the Damn Good Doctors Club. So we have clinical clarity. And then after that, as I mentioned, I was doing one-on-ones. Even though I went online, I wasn't really kind of working the internet to its fullest in terms of leverage. So I'd have scheduled calls, which a lot of times they teach you these online systems, and it's like, okay, you're going to run a funnel, and you got to get a lead magnet, and then you got to run a funnel and grab the person's email address, and then you do anything you can to send them to a webinar or something and talk them into booking a one-on-one. They have different names for this, right? It's a sales call basically, but it would be like, oh, your one-on-one consultation or your discovery call or your breakthrough call, right? I've done it. I've done that model, and I don't like it, to be honest with you. I feel like there's a little bit of like you're kind of bait and switching people. It's a little bit desperate marketing. It's also getting old now. Everybody's seen it. Nobody wants to put their email in for anything anymore. And I don't blame them. You know, you get swamped with this stuff. So you got to think again from the patient's perspective. Have they been in people's funnels before? Do they know what a discovery call is, a strategy session? Do they know that you're really just basically going to try to sell them on your program? Right? There's a lot of those things that I think we can do better. And I actually know we can do better. So I took a lot of mentorship, and I learned a lot of these internet business type models, and I tried a lot of things, and I eventually discovered there was one mentor in particular that really opened my eyes to some of this stuff in terms of breaking out into a non-linear environment. So meaning you get off of the sales calls, right? You get off of the email blasts. You don't have to do all that stuff. You don't hound your potential patients. You're not desperate at all because that stuff gets old, you know? So we've got a whole new way to do it, and it's been working great. And as soon as I introduced that in my ecosystem, then I noticed a lot of my life changed, and I was able to help more people. I built up a bigger international base of clients who are working on complex chronic health conditions, and my life got a lot different because now I wasn't scheduled anymore. So when I look at my day, it's an empty space, and I can do things like create videos and do research and kind of just build my brain and my expertise and communicate and help people in an organic way without having to be necessarily like chained to a desk with a phone stuck to my ear, trying to talk somebody into a program that I just met, right? So instead we have ways to actually nurture relationships for real, where by the time somebody's even considering applying for my program, we've already interacted, communicated, they've maybe been watching me work for a couple weeks, a month, something like that. Right? They know what they're getting into. They've gotten to meet other people that I'm working with currently. They've gotten to see stories about what's happened before. It's a really warm environment, and you can create this online environment where your practice becomes a community. It becomes a home. It becomes a place where you love showing up to, even though it's digital, right? Even though you're on your phone or you're on your computer, it's like you show up and you've built a world there. And there's real connections and people getting together and making friends through your work. It's like the best parts of having a practice in real life, like a brick and mortar practice, having that community aspect where it's real, where the people know each other and they help each other with things. You can create that as a part of your work online. So I've taken mentorship. I've taken a lot of notes, right? I've paid really close attention to things. I've had outstanding teachers. I still have outstanding teachers. I'm learning stuff every day. So, you know, I'm not fixed and perfect and it's not static. But if you're interested in starting to develop some of these skills, right? We have clinical clarity. We've got fractal systems where you get around your business. Like I said, where you're dialing in and making it non-linear, so you're not doing sales calls, strategy sessions, you don't have email lists, you're not trying to twist somebody's arm to get them to watch your webinar, you don't have to worry about your lead magnets. None of it. None of it. You build a lean, minimal, flexible container for your work, and then you can navigate yourself through it, put your own skin on it, and imbue your personality into it. It's fantastic. So fractal systems is what we call that. That's where we work on that. We have a third branch called personal cultivation, which I touched on burnout a little bit. I'm not even going to get into that in this video, but those are the three things we work on in the Damn Good Doctors Club. The three main themes. I've noticed that when we have this dialed in, we can get like the three kind of legs of a tripod. You can get a lot of balance, and they all kind of lean on each other and move together. So The questions I get from practitioners kind of shows me where they're at in terms of which area needs more work, like where their weak spot is. And we're all growing. We're all working on things. I don't have all the answers. I'm learning as I go, but I'll tell you what, I've had outstanding instruction. And the things that we found that are deduced down to the first principles, the basics, the foundations, this stuff applies across the board in medicine, and it's very, very exciting. It's very exciting to me because now you have a way to really maximize your impact without burning out. And that's important. One of the things I've noticed for myself is that I'm not optimized on volume so much. I'm not so worried about how many patients. I'm really more interested in longer term relationships, because I've learned now that at this level of medicine, that's what you're developing, longer term relationships, so you can really help somebody, especially with these complex chronic conditions. So that means you can help people that are really going to be a good fit for you long term. One of the things I've noticed here is that a lot of people have clinical clarity to some extent. Like, we can be pretty good physicians, and we have a good diagnostic eye. And then when it comes to our own business, our own practice, all of a sudden we have a schism, right? We don't see that our skills in medicine can actually transfer to practice management and business development. And this was a big epiphany I had too, was when I realized that my clinic, my practice, is a living organism. It is an ecosystem. And if I treat it as such, I can use the diagnostic muscles I've developed from my medical training, and I can use that same type of thinking to help my clinic and my practice grow and get stronger. So just like in medicine, you'll see symptoms, right? You'll see these branches. And your job, if you want to be a good physician, is to start to dig down to the roots and the roots beneath the roots and understand this from a whole systems perspective, right? So you don't just take the symptom and just try to smash the symptom. Now, when we look over at our businesses, especially if you're going online, right, doing online business, then one of the symptoms is, I need more leads, right? I need more new patients. Okay, these are kind of different ways to say the same thing. Where am I going to get these new patients from? Or I need better marketing, or I need better attraction, right? Basically, you need new eyeballs on you. And that's the problem. That's the problem we perceive. As I've learned, right, and as you're learning, the branches aren't always the roots, right? The symptom is you don't have people coming in. You don't have people contacting you. You don't have a full schedule for if you're doing one-on-one calls, you haven't booked it out, right? You're not full and packed on your Calendly or Schedule One or whatever, right? That's your symptom, okay? But maybe there's deeper roots there. Maybe there's something else. Maybe it's not about attraction, right? Maybe it comes down to communication. Maybe when we start breaking this down, you're not saying the right things. You don't have the right copywriting skills. You're not articulate in a way that your niche understands, right? You may be speaking in a way that makes sense to you, but the way they learn, they don't perceive it that way, right? You haven't developed this skill, right? But what's under that? We can't stop there. We haven't hit the root yet. How do we know these things, right? How do we become good communicators, right? How do we learn how to speak well? Well, first, we learn how to listen well, right? 2 ears, 1 mouth, that kind of thing. It's it's an oldie but a goodie. And I think it's a good thing to keep in mind. Your ability to listen will determine your ability to speak in a way where other people will hear you, because you've taken the time to get to know them, to get to know their language, to have real empathy, right? So we could say this, okay, I have a symptom in my practice is I don't have enough new patients. Okay, well, let's trace back some of the roots. How are you speaking to the public, right? And then go further back from that. Maybe it's not communication, maybe it's a market research issue. Maybe you need to get systems around this, right? Because when we get systems around it, then things happen. This is what I've learned. Created market research systems so that I don't have communication issues. I take the time, I take the effort, I pay attention, and I listen because I really care what people are saying and how they're saying it. I want to know their worldview so that I can lean in and communicate in a way that they understand. It's an incredible disservice when you're talking past your patients. And you know that what you have could probably help them, but they don't understand that, right? And it's not their fault, it's your fault, because it's your job to translate. It's your job to be the one who communicates the language of your medicine into the language of that patient's wants, needs, beliefs, right? What matters to them? It's their life. We want to respect our patients. We don't want to disrespect our patients. When we treat our patients like children that don't have free agency, we disrespect them. We have to recognize that there is a sovereign individual right there that doesn't need something done to it, right? It needs guidance and sometimes permission to start letting go and accessing something that you can provide a framework for, but you're not there to command them or boss them around. right? In a clinical relationship, this makes sense. Of course, any physician with any kind of integrity is standing there nodding at this. Yes, of course, we must empower the patients, right? How come that skill then doesn't transfer from your actual service to attraction, communication, right? Are you communicating to your patients like they're babies? Are you talking down at them? Or are you taking the time to recognize their individual sovereignty as adults, right? Not doctor, patient, right? As adults. Recognize that sovereignty and take your time to listen and develop systems around it so that you don't forget this skill. Because it takes time to develop. It takes time to get anywhere near decent at this. And you have to be practicing. It's just like any other exercise. But it's worth it because now you're taking the effort to really learn how people think, what language they use, so that you can communicate to them in a way that they understand. We always have decisions to make about what words to use. We may as well take our time and learn how our audience understands the world. And if you don't have that system in place, then of course communication's missing. And of course downstream we have effects of no one's on my schedule. Of course, right? A lot of times we look at this, we go, okay, I need attraction, so I better take a Facebook ads course or something like that. I need more new patients. Where are they going to come from? And you're just going after the symptom. You got to go deeper under that, right? And even there's more even than what I said about listening and doing market research. There's a root to that too. This gets progressively more internal the more you're willing to inspect and diagnose your business, because it is a living ecosystem. And guess where the center of that ecosystem is? Guess where the Gaia energy, the equator, the axis of that ecosystem, it's you, right? This whole thing's emanating off of your spine in concentric circles radiating out into the universe. Your principles, your values, your belief systems, your mindset, that colors all of that energy, all of it. So if you want to change the way you get new patients, right? How mundane, but at the same time, how salient when that's the problem, right? If you want to change the way you do that, you have to change ultimately the way you communicate, which means the way you listen, the way you get systems around things, but also who you are as a human. You may have to update your value system, right? Which isn't always an easy thing to do. So these are the kinds of conversations that we're having in our group. It's a free group to join as a guest. I will tell you, I've got programs around this. I'm starting to offer official mentorships to certain colleagues and other healthcare professionals. And I value my time, I value my attention, I value the people I work with, and I'm not cheap to work with. With that being said, you can always come in our group. Check it out, it's free. You can get a taste for what we're doing, you can get a taste for the kinds of conversations we're having, you can get a taste for these ideas, you can start to get some early wins. I mean, put some of this stuff into your practice immediately. Report back to the group. I love that when people come back, even if they haven't paid a dime, right? But there's something valuable that happened. I gave, right? I shared. So it's a no risk, no obligation kind of thing. You can come on in, you can be a guest. I'll check out your application, though. It is by application. I'm not just letting anybody in there. It's got to be the right kind of folks that have good vision and are sophisticated and kind and not complainers, right? Good attitudes. No secondary gains. We know why we're here. We're here to learn and grow, right? So when I see that, if I see your application, it looks really good, I'll get back to you. There may be a bit of a wait for the group, especially if it's full, because it is cozy. I keep the numbers kind of low, so that way I can know everybody that's in there. But maybe a month, maybe 2 months, maybe sooner. But I'll get back to you as soon as I can with a decision on your application. And again, it's free. And I've got a vault full of videos in there that are going to upgrade your brain. You can start to download some of the things that I've gathered up and synthesized over my years here. I was just adding it up, I've put over $250,000 into personal and professional development so far in my career. So that may seem like a lot. It may just be the beginning. I'm not sure. But I've invested a lot in my brain and my worldview, and I'm happy to share that and share my perspective within our group, provided that everybody's civil and kind and has the right kind of attitude. The other thing, too, is that we're off of big tech. So it's a private chat group, which is lovely because we don't have to worry about censorship and the algorithm gods coming in and blocking us or banning us because we talked about some kind of forbidden taboo topic. So it's a good chance, it's a good opportunity to have very open, very candid conversations with peers that are level-headed and going places. Anyhow, there's your invitation. It's called the Damn Good Doctors Club. My name is Jeremy, and if you're interested in spending some more time hanging out with us and kind of seeing what we can do for you in your practice to help you help your patients, because they need you right now. The world, we know what's going on in the world, right? Open your eyes. Of course, the people need help, and they need you to be there, and they need you to be there without burning out. So that's what we do. All right, let's get to work.